Well, to discuss the situation more in Syria, I'm joined from Washington by Webster Griffin Tarpley, author and historian. Welcome to the programme, sir. Dr. Tarpley, the statements coming from Western sources over the Houla Massacre seem to be a mix of realities and speculations. I mean, we have the UN Human Rights Office saying that during the massacre, the government was shelling the neighbourhood. I mean, how could the military have been shelling the place if it had its own forces on the ground there?
I think you'll find that the Western accounts are coherent with a major NATO war provocation. All honest observers know that the fundamental problem in Syria is the presence of NATO death squads that have been brought in large numbers, armed, fomented by the NATO states, and this has now taken on a certain momentum of its own. This is not the first time that the NATO people have tried to get a large-scale massacre that they could try to inflame public opinion with. However, I would cite three on-the-ground eyewitness reports that I've verified myself. First one comes from Fides. Fides is an Italian Roman Catholic missionary news service, and they point to the fact that the reality of the Houla Massacre is that these fighters, right, extremists, Al-Qaeda or Salafi, whatever they were, came in and started targeting the Armenian Christians and the Roman Catholics, the Franciscans, and some others. This is one package. Then we have a Belgian website with an author called Vox Clamantis, which describes in detail how it was done, that the hospital in Houla was burned down and the people that had been taking refuge in it were systematically massacred from up close by the death squads, not by the government. Then we have the Russian journalist operating in Syria, Anhar Kochneva. You can look at some of the work that she's put on the internet where you have actual eyewitnesses speaking in Arabic, and it's translated into Russian, but there's also a text which you can translate into English if you want to, or some other language, which is similarly the same thing. They say that they are being oppressed by these death squads, in effect, and that they're angry with Kofi Annan and with Qatar for enabling this. So if you put it all together, there's yet a further element, which is that there has been an attempt, it's gruesome and it's macabre, but to procure cadavers. The NATO side, the death squads they sponsor, have been attempting to build up a stock of cadavers that they could then use in this way. The model for this, of course, is what Himmler, Heydrich, and Goebbels did at the Gleiwitz radio station in Germany on the Polish border to provoke war with Poland in August, September 1939. This is exactly the same method that's now being used by NATO in Syria.
But that said, I mean, who would benefit from killing women and innocent children in Syria?
Well, the goal of this is to build up war hysteria in world public opinion, and this has succeeded to some extent because of the controlled, brainwashing Western media, the kinds of stories that have been put out, all one-sided, all quite fantastic. Then it goes together with the idea, of course, that now at least 12 NATO countries and others have kicked out the Syrian diplomatic representatives. So there's an attempt to build up a certain momentum. The Russian delegation going into the UN meeting on Sunday afternoon was already skeptical that you couldn't, somehow the NATO story doesn't add up. In other words, it can't be artillery and tanks on the one hand and everybody killed from up close on the other. That contradiction was obvious from the very beginning. And obviously we need Russia to hang tough, to remain strong on this and not to cave in under this immense pressure. But the idea is either regime change immediately or war and then regime change. And as that Gleiwitz Polish example suggests, this is the kind of thing that gets you on your way to a war. The way the war could come is quite obvious. We now have Operation Eager Lion 2012. We've got 12,000 troops from 17 countries in Jordan, mainly US, Jordanian, and some other NATO. This drill could immediately go live. It could immediately cross the Syrian border, so to speak, and start a war, since the elements, the spearhead of such a war has already been assembled on the territory of Jordan. So we are literally on the brink of a very large regional war.
Indeed. I mean, Turkey has hosted a group of opposition groups ahead of an expected resignation of Burhan Ghaliun, the head of the so-called Syrian National Council. I mean, what do you think was the aim and achievement of this meeting?
Well, Turkey up to now has not taken the plunge. The pressure coming from NATO on Turkey, of course, is that they've got to launch an attack. That would be national suicide for Turkey, because it would guarantee an uprising of the Kurds, and this would tear apart the post-Ataturk Turkish state. So that would be a very, very bad choice. But we're constantly getting reports that Erdogan is looking at invoking NATO Article 4. There is no basis for this. And of course, the so-called Syrian National Council is a gaggle of adventurers. It's a gaggle of profiteers and rent seekers and adventurers who are trying to get money from various Western countries so that they can continue to live the high life in these hotels. And the fact that just after 51% of the Syrian people voted for an actual election, which was open, it was not a one-party election at all. A couple of weeks after that election being successful, the Syrian National Council fell apart just about completely with this guy Ghaliun resigning. I think that says a lot. NATO is politically defeated, but their only answer to that is to try to escalate it militarily, and for that they've got to use these provocations, which again are just the kind of thing that we saw coming from the Nazis on the verge of World War II.
Indeed. On that note, we'll leave it there. Many thanks to Webster Griffin Tarpley, author and historian from Washington. Thanks for your time there, sir.